Back when it was first built in 1886, the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs was America's newest and most luxurious hotel. Well, as time passed and it changed hands, the Crescent Hotel became known worldwide for quite a different reason, as America's most haunted hotel. Tales of the Crescent ghosts began even when the hotel was still being built. Meet Michael, one of the Irish stone masons who lost his balance and fell through the middle of the building, landing on a beam which is now room 218, and where he is said to linger. In the 1920s, when the hotel functioned as a conservatory for young ladies, the history of the school reported an accident one night of a student who was on the upper terrace and somehow fell to her death in the garden below. Observers will now sometimes see a falling cloud of mist with a human figure. In 1937, a quack and a con man by the name of Norman Baker converted the Crescent into Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital. Many came in hopes of getting treated, and many died. And it's not every hotel that has its own morgue.
What's behind me was originally kind of an ice freezer in the early days before they had real refrigerators. And that's where they used to keep stuff for the kitchens upstairs. When Baker was here, he used this to store his dead bodies. This is where he would put them while he was waiting to take them off to the mortuary after they died up in the hotel. He would store them in there. And he would conduct the autopsies, or his surgeons would conduct the autopsies in this room. This is probably some kind of a prep table. The autopsy table would have been in the middle of the room, of course, so you can walk all the way around it. So it would have been over there somewhere. So this is what he called his morgue. You know, when you think of a morgue, you think of like white tile and everything beautiful and clean. And as you can see, this kind of gives you an impression of how much he cared about the people who died under his care, which is not very much. And this is one of the most active places in the building. This is where the tour ends, the ghost tours that we do every day of the week.
In a room next to the morgue, appropriately called the parts room, the deranged Baker kept jars of formaldehyde which contained the organs of patients. Yeah. Throughout the years, many hotel guests have had their share of unusual experiences.
About 3 o'clock this morning, I was in room 425. Woke up, sat around there for about 30 minutes, couldn't go back to sleep. So I decided to walk out on the balcony on the 4th floor to smoke a cigarette. So I did, and I stood out there probably 20, 30 minutes, and it's give or take around 4 a.m. I come walking back down the hallway, and there's a breaking point, kind of a breaks over here, kind of a hump in the floor. I come across that hump, and when I come to this area, it's a kind of a foggy mist in this whole hallway area right here. And as I walk into it, I think, who's smoking in the hallway? Because you're not supposed to smoke in the hotel, you know. So I'll make a left here, and I'll go down to my room. When I get to my room, I put the key in the door, and whenever I open it, step inside, I just take a glance back, and it's all gone. So, kind of an eerie feeling. So I walk in, shut the door, I don't come back out till daylight. And so that was just, but it was all clear, and this was what they call Miss Theodore's room. You know that. And supposed to be a real eerie feel in this area. Don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but I do know what I saw here, and I've not seen it since.
Theodora was a resident in room 419 at the time of Baker's Cancer Hospital. She is sometimes seen outside her door fumbling with her keys. Hotel employees as well have either seen or heard things.
Well, I was staying in room 316, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I heard really loud, squeaky wheels, like just rusty wheels, going right by the door. And I got up to see what was going on, and when I went out and opened the door, there was nothing there, and as soon as I opened the door, the sound stopped. And if it was someone playing a trick on me, they didn't have time to run down and hide around either corner, because I was in the middle of the hallway, and I would have heard them and seen them going around the corner. So I can't debunk it, and so I'm convinced I heard the nurse.
That nurse is the lady in white guests have reportedly spotted on the 3rd floor wearing an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, pushing a gurney covered with a sheet. Then there's the apparition of a little girl either going up or down the stairs. Apparently, in the late 1930s, she fell to her death from the 4th floor banisters all the way down to the ground floor. The 1905 Basin Park Hotel in Eureka Springs is also evidently occupied by haints. There's the pretty young girl in a long white dress who still waits for her groom. And then the cowboy who roams the halls looking for one last drink. He's also terrified guests by walking through walls. So check in at the Basin or Crescent, and possibly you too can meet up with someone interesting.
I can't stop crying over you.
The 1906 Allen House in Monticello. According to a bestandworst.com internet poll among 80 homes, it has the unique distinction of being the most haunted house in America. Paranormal investigators have determined that at least 6 spirits occupy the home, with the main one being the Allen's second daughter, Liddell, who committed suicide Christmas night in 1948 after her secret love affair went sour. That secret wasn't revealed until current owner Mark Spencer discovered love letters in the attic.
The first batch of letters that I discovered were from October of 1948. I opened up one of the white envelopes, pulled the letter out, and the salutation was dearest. It was signed love, and then there was the initial P. And I realized in that moment that I was looking at a love letter written to Liddell 2 months prior to her suicide.
It was in the attic that Spencer had his first encounter with Liddell.
At one point in the day, as I'm reading the letters, I actually looked up at the ceiling of the attic and I said, "Liddell, I'm so sorry." It was shortly after that that I looked up again and I saw a woman walking toward me. She looked like a woman out of the 1920s. That was my impression. And I wiped sweat out of my eyes and blinked a few times. And then when I looked again, the woman was further back in the attic. It was my wife coming up the attic stairs. And so it was very strange. This woman was approaching me, and then she's gone and my wife is coming up the attic stairs. So that was rather uncanny.
Another Liddell encounter was in the master bedroom where she consumed mercury cyanide. At first, Spencer thought it was his wife, Rebecca.
The odd thing that I immediately registered was that she didn't seem to have the drapes pulled back. So it was like she was looking out the window, but she would have to be looking through the drapes to be looking out the window. So immediately I thought that was a little bit odd, but I step into the room and I walk all the way across the room. So I'm looking at her for several seconds as I'm walking across the room. And I get within about 3 feet of her, and I open my mouth to say, "Hey, what you doing?" And she vanished.
Then there's the mystery of the ghost children.
Various people who have lived in the house or visited the house have mentioned seeing ghost children, these small ghostly entities. And paranormal investigators have recorded electronic voice phenomena of children's voices. We've even had guests in the house record children's voices.
On a 1908 postcard of the home, one can make out the ghostly image of a little boy on the left side of the front steps. In 2010, Rebecca Spencer met face-to-face with a ghost child.
And as soon as my eyes locked onto it, I couldn't look away. And I think I was stuck looking at this thing for maybe 5-10 seconds. And looking at it wasn't scary. What was scary or disturbing was the fact that I couldn't control my reaction to seeing it. Because as soon as I saw it, I couldn't breathe. It was like my internal organs all wrenched up together, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything except stand there and look at it. And when I was able to blink and sort of look away, then it was gone when I looked back, and I was perfectly fine.
Then there was the Victrola incident.
Well, this Victrola was downstairs in the parlor. And we had an event booked the next day in the house. I think it was a bridal shower or something. So I was in there just sprucing up the room, and I turned on the vacuum, going right by the Victrola, and my eye caught movement as I was walking by it, and I noticed that the record inside it was spinning. And I just kept vacuuming, but in my mind, I'm thinking, that's really weird. Or maybe the kids have messed with it, maybe that's why it's spinning. I didn't really know. And it just wouldn't leave me alone, so I stopped the vacuum and I went back and looked at it, and it was still going, but it was actually going faster when I went back. And the longer I looked at it, the faster it went. Eventually, it was going fast enough to play the record. So I put the needle down, and as soon as the needle touched the record, it stopped instantly.
Apparently, Liddell's mother would play the Victrola quite often for guests. The Allen House is open for guided tours by appointment, and also the last 2 days in October for special Halloween tours.
My heart belongs to you.
The MacArthur Museum of Arkansas Military History in Little Rock is known as one of the most haunted places in the South. In 1840, the federal government constructed the Little Rock Arsenal for the storage of munitions and weapons as a frontier military post. Later, it was converted into housing for officers and their families. In 1880, General Douglas MacArthur was born here. In 1892, the military post was turned into Little Rock's first public park, and the tower, or Arsenal building, was the only structure remaining out of more than 30 buildings. In 2001, it opened as the MacArthur Museum of Arkansas Military History.
So what we do is we preserve the building, interpret its past, its ties to our state's earliest military history, its birthplace of a nationally and internationally known military figure, and then we use the building and the exhibits to talk about the role that our state played in military conflicts from the Civil War through the present.
Being one of Central Arkansas's oldest structures, and the fact that it was vacant for such a long time, led up to the haunting of the Arsenal building.
As with most old buildings, there are stories of ghosts and paranormal activity here in this building. Most of the stories that I have read date back to events that would have happened here while it was functioning as an arsenal. Stories of the sound of chests of ammunition being dragged across the floor. There's one story of a young lady who was wandering around looking for a soldier who went off to war and never came back. A story of an African-American lady who did laundry for the soldiers, and then a story of two soldiers fighting. Those are all stories that would date back to the building's use as an arsenal. We get frequent calls by ghost hunting groups who want to do investigations here at the museum. We allow that under some tightly controlled restrictions.
Paranormal investigators who have spent time here are not disappointed.
It is scary at times, especially the tower. The tower has a man in it, And he's a man spirit, and we really don't know who he is. And he's still up there, and he watches over the museum. Been told by psychics that he really watches over. He does not like the paranormal groups in, you know, but he watches over all the other people coming in and everything. The oldest reports of hauntings would be the woman in white. She's on the landing, the staircase, the grand staircase landing behind me, and she's looking out the window. She's waiting for her husband to return from the war. And so we really don't know any more than that, and that is people have seen her, and that's what a psychic has come up with. That's who she is. That's why she's here. She's waiting.
The King Opera House in Van Buren was constructed in 1891, originally as 3 businesses. It then opened as an opera house in 1901. And what happened 2 years later was the beginning of the legend of the phantom, or ghost, if you will. In 1903, a Charles Tolson with the Tolson Traveling Theater Group came to Van Buren.
The group was quite well known in the area, and even there was a local physician that used to meet the actor after the shows in the saloons, and they'd have drinks, and somewhere along the line the physician had a daughter that had a lot of interest in well, we really can't say for sure that it was just the theater. It very well could have been the handsome young actor, but somewhere or the other there was some information that was given her father that last night, and so that in the wee hours of the next morning he was at the depot when the young actor come in to buy tickets and ended up shooting him and killing him.
Because
he thought that he was paying, improper attention to his daughter. This is what someone had told him over the phone about midnight that night.
Decades later, after the King Opera House closed, then was bought by the city of Van Buren, during renovations in the 1980s, before opening again, a worker had a paranormal experience.
Well, one of the men that stayed here late to finish painting the scenery before the show was to open the next day spotted something out in the auditorium floor. He was on an 8-foot ladder painting right up in the corner, and he sees this. He says, like a little whirlwind. And it just certainly drew his attention, so he just kind of turned on the ladder and watched it. And he said as he watched it, that as it began to spin, that it grew larger. And then at a certain point, he said it was like it floated or drifted. It wasn't quite sure what term to use, but that to the stage. And when it came down on the stage, it began to take this form of a young man in a top hat, a frock coat, and that he just kind of drifted to one side of the stage and then to the other, came back to the center and turned towards the back of the stage. And as he walked back, the scene painter is high enough on the ladder that he can see both sides of the scenery. And so he sees him as he reaches the scenery and then doesn't see anything come through on the other side. So from the way that he was dressed, I think that's then where we began to pull in, remember the young actor that had been murdered at the depot, and I think that's kind of how he became our Opera House ghost.
There's also been some difficulty in keeping the lights turned off.
I started working here in '98, and I still occasionally, even though I have it down to a routine, I know I've turned every one of those lights out. Occasionally, I still will come in and there will be a light on.
And someone had an experience with the seat coming down. And
there was a couple reported they came in, they were running a little bit late. They got here just not too long before curtain time, and they went in, they sit down, the seats next to her were empty, and she said just as the lights dimmed, that the seat next to her just goes down as if someone were sitting in it, and she kind of nudges her husband, and, you know, did you see? No, I didn't say anything. So she said then right before intermission, before the lights come up, the seat comes up, as if, you know, someone had been sitting there. And
Dr. Parchman, by the way, was acquitted in 1904 of murdering Tolson, a murder that was committed in cold blood. And so, the phantom of the King Opera House remains restless. In 1875, Colonel Samuel West Peale built a beautiful villa tower Italianate mansion in what was then the outskirts of Bentonville. The Peale Mansion was a working farmstead surrounded by 180 acres of apple orchards instead of the current gardens. Peale fought in the Civil War and was the first native-born Arkansan elected to the U.S. Congress. Together with his wife, Mary Emmeline, they raised 9 children here.
(1875), and when they restored the house, now it had been restored once, I would say in 1980, but then when the Peale Compton Foundation got it, and I think they opened it up for tours in 1992. Well, they went that extra step. They took core samples, and they knew that this was the very similar wallpaper. Of course, it's not original, but it was very similar. So they went that extra step to bring it back to life.
But they may have brought it back to life a little too much. Tour guides tell stories of the piano in the parlor playing all by itself.
I've heard it play when there's no one here, yes. In their stories, all the Peale girls, there were 5 girls, and well, 6 girls and 3 boys, and all the girls played the piano. So we just assume it's possibly one of the daughters doing her piano practice.
During the months of October, sometimes we'll have tours and teach people about the mourning customs of the Victorians. And it ties into this house because Mary Emmeline actually fell ill on Christmas Eve and passed away in this house. And her funeral was actually held, her wake was actually held here in the parlor. And so we like to tell people about the customs of Victorians, because when Prince Albert died, Queen Victoria raised the mourning for people to a high elevation, and poor people feared dying, not because of death, but for not being able to mourn their relatives. So I would be representing a lady who is in deep or heavy mourning, and I would have to wear all black. I could only wear a bonnet, not a hat, and I would cover my face with crepe, and you would never see me without it. And the crepe was to protect me from your prying eyes and you from the tears that I was shedding, but it also
They believed that the spirit of my loved one would hover around me. And if you looked into my tear-stained eyes, you might actually attract my loved one, and that person might be attached to you. So you avoided that at all cost.
There's also the apparent apparition of Minnie Bell, one of the Peale daughters who suffered from melancholy or depression as we know it. According to Colonel Peale's letters, she would constantly be running up the stairs and then sit up in the tower, looking out the window. So venture if you dare and experience for yourself the Peale Mansion and all the other hauntings of Arkansas.